I want to start with the 10 reasons, the 10 top reasons that I would love to have you consider or continue to homeschool. So now we get a little more nitty-gritty. First, tutoring. When someone is having difficulty in school, what is the go-to? What will help that child be able to understand and then turn the corner and be able to do better in a class? Everyone recommends tutoring, one-on-one. That's what homeschooling is. You know what that child knows. One of my friends asked me early on, are you keeping grades? And in elementary school, I did not keep grades. I did not begin recording any grades at all until 7th grade because, and that's the second one, the goal is mastery, not grades. What does a grade mean? It is an evaluation, usually in a large group, where a teacher cannot know the abilities of every individual student, and it's valid. My husband's a professor, and it would be very difficult for him in his large classes to have intimate knowledge of what the other people have learned from him without testing, without grading. But A means you understood. B means you understood most of it. C means you understood a good bit of it. D means you didn't get a lot of it, and F means you really, really didn't get it. I don't fault anybody for doing a grading system, but the goal is mastery. I remember one of my children really struggling with multiplication. And so after doing several pages in her book, and she wasn't able to get it, we set the book aside, and I began to use manipulatives. We began to play games. I used flashcards. We tried lots of different methods, and all of a sudden it clicked. 3 weeks later, we're back into the book. Was she behind? No, because that's where we picked up in the book. We had worked on it to mastery. That's the goal. Third, you go at the child's pace. And I thought Roddy had just excellent assessment of this, because you can have children who are early readers, and they go and they are stuck sitting there going, Dick and Jane can swim, along with the whole class, even though they could already read a much more complex book. But again, you cannot fault a teacher for not individualizing. It's just not possible. But in your homeschool, you can. So you have a child who reads easily but struggles with math, then you focus more on the math, and the reading is up to whatever the speed is that they have. Or you do vice versa. One of the things, and I'll give this as an example, okay, I told you about our first day of our first year of homeschooling. Well, I want to fast forward to the first day of our second year of homeschooling. Michael was now 5 and a half, almost 6, doing first grade, and Gabriel had just turned 4. Hannah was 1. And so we had our opening school pictures, and we did our routine, and then I got out Michael's books, and Gabe said, where are my books? And I said, well, honey, you're 4, so next year will be your kindergarten year. Huge tears dripping off his face. I'm doing school this year. And so quick adjustment, I'm thinking, okay, I already bought his kindergarten math book, and we're gonna use the same phonics program we had upstairs. So I'm like, okay, today can be your first day of kindergarten. I'll be right back. So I went upstairs, grabbed the books, came down. So we did the first letter, B. And he got the sound, and we had some fun with it. And then I handed him his math book. It was a 125-page Addison Wesley kindergarten math book. He did page after page after page after page. And it was like I would help Michael on a little bit, and then Gabe wanted me to explain the next page. And I said, honey, you don't need to keep doing math. He said, I want to. So I put it away after lunch, and he got it out again. And I am not kidding you. He finished it on day 2, and I had to order the first grade math book. Like, I had not purchased the first grade math book for my child who just turned 4. We learned that second letter the next day, the third letter, the fourth letter. Then the way my program worked, you learned one short vowel and you began to put them together. So Gabe's standing at the blackboard, and he's going, b-ah, 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 and we're all, Michael and I are both, okay, ba. Oh, yeah, ba. Okay, d-ah. I mean, he could not get the idea that you blended two sounds together. It just absolutely didn't make sense at all. We tried it for several days, and I thought, I am really beating my head into the wall, and this is just not what we're going to do. So I changed direction. By then, the first grade math book had come in, and he was plowing through it. And so I said, we're just going to learn letters this year. And we spent a whole week on each letter. I did lots of fun, creative things. We cut up magazines looking for the sound, and we just played with letters and did math. And then whatever reading and history I was doing and reading and science, I just included him, and he would sit and draw and cut and color. At the end of the year, he was almost finished with first grade math. And I said, what was your favorite class? And he said, learning letters. He didn't know he was a failure at reading. Had he been in a kindergarten class, he would have been a failure in reading, and he would have been bored out of his mind in math, and yet he loved learning letters. Why would a child have to know that they have failed at something when it's just a physiological thing? So fast forward to the fall. It's the beginning of his official first grade year. He's now in second grade math. And up on the blackboard, he's like, ba, ga, da, fa. And then we started adding the ending letters, and it, effortless. So get to the next year. He's 5 years old, and I'm doing, or that was his 5-year-old year. So we're doing math, and I'm doing it with my older son, multiplication. And Gabe starts answering. You know, Michael, what is 2 times 6? 12. Gabe, honey, you're not a part of this. We're doing third grade math, you know. And he kept jumping in. He couldn't help it. He loved it. And so, again, this is where I would say, expect the unexpected. You don't know what gifts and abilities certain children have. So in my sort of school brain, I'm thinking, multiplication is third grade. You don't do third grade work in first grade. And I began to think, why? If he can do this, okay, so let's change it. Now, they're both very competitive. So I began to do something called penny math. And what I would do, and I have stacks of flashcards. Do you have yard sales around here? You don't use yard sales? Okay, so I don't know if you have places where you can get flashcards really cheap, but I would just buy packages anytime I found them, just to have a lot on hand. And so I would give them 5 seconds, and they had to answer it correctly. If they answered it correctly, they got a penny. So we initially just did the zeros, and maybe ones. And then the next day I added all the 2s. And if in 5 seconds one child didn't get it, then the other child had a chance to get the penny. And then the next card was still that child's. So there was a little competition, but they had 5 full seconds to get the answer. And then after we did all the multiplication tables, then I eliminated the zeros, then I eliminated the 1s, eliminated the 2s, and then I began to charge them a penny for a wrong answer. And after about 3 weeks of playing around with this, they both had mastered it. Michael was 7.5, which was young to learn multiplication. Gabe was 5. But he got it. And he's the one that at 14, I did calculus, a year of calculus with him. And then he did 3 semesters of college calculus before he turned 18 and went on to major in math, graduated summa cum laude in math and theology, odd combination. Now has a master's in theology, and he just passed his CPA. So math was a gift, a skill, an ability he had, but he still did the other subjects, and he did them fine. He just had a propensity for something. When you get to know your child, and you may not, I didn't know that he had a great gift for math. When you spend this time with your children and you see the things that just make their eyes light up, where they're eager to do an extra page, an extra assignment, you pick up on what is meaningful to them, what really just causes delight in them. My oldest son, I would say, what emerged was theology and philosophy, and he's the professor of theology at Christendom College. For my daughter, it was literature. I mean, if she got a free moment, she stole that moment to do a little extra reading, where I have some children that just still hate to read, even as adults. I mean, it's just a harder process for them. My son Jeremiah loved history, and just, if I want to know a date, I don't know why I can't keep track of it after all these years of teaching and reviewing, but I can forget what century things happened, and I just ask Jeremiah, and he knows who did it, he knows the date. Anyway, when you spend that time with your child, you find out where certain sort of gifts and abilities are, and you can run with that. Now, I want to give you a secret that has been, I would say, one of my secrets of success. And this is still, I'm still under the third if you're counting. This is under the child's pace. Marbles. Extra credit marbles. This has been magic for me in homeschooling. Now, this is the process. I bought about 100 marbles, very cheap at a dollar store. And I told my children, for every extra lesson you do in any subject, you earn a marble. And in our family, a marble is worth a dime, 10 cents. Now you can decide what it's worth in your family. It might only be a penny, might be worth more. And I said, and I'm going to buy something fun. This was not a spiritual gift. This was just pure bribery, actually. But they didn't, it was not for doing their normal work. They had to do their normal work. But every extra page of math, every extra page of phonics, every extra lesson of handwriting, anything that we were doing that they finished in a timely fashion and we had time to do an extra lesson, they got a marble. Now, we had just moved to near Pittsburgh, Steubenville, but Pittsburgh Pirates were our team, and our boys were really into baseball. So you could pick a sport that your kids are really into, and you can get boxes of baseball cards. And actually, there's more value to cards when you get a whole set. So I would buy a box of, say, 787 cards, and do the math, and for it came out to about 3 baseball cards would cost a marble. And literally, that first year in Steubenville, so the boys were 7 and 5, they could get their cards at the end of the day. So I had boxes labeled for them, and so if they did 2 extra pages, they would have 6 new cards. Gabriel learned to read because he wanted to read the statistics and understand the statistics and read the sports page. So it encouraged his reading. It gave them an incentive, which at the end of the day, I could pay them, in a sense, for all that extra work. And what did that do for me? It got us ahead more and more and more. So that I was getting closer with no pressure from me at all. I was getting closer and closer to my goals for the end of the year. Now, if they couldn't do the work, obviously that wouldn't have worked, but they were able to. So Hannah's first year, which is a couple years later, I said, now, Daddy will take you out for ice cream when you get 10 marbles. And of course, I rightly understood that she would love the time with her daddy. What I forgot was that she didn't care for desserts. So all fall, she did not get more than a couple marbles. I mean, and I would say it this way. I would say, now, of course, you don't have to earn any extra credit today, and I would point to the boxes because they were up on the windowsill, and I would say to the boys, but you know, it's 3 cards per marble. And of course, every day they had at least 1 or 2 marbles to turn in for cards. But we just couldn't incentivize Hannah. So we get all the way to near Easter. We're on a little trip down south over spring break, and we go into a Kmart type store, Walmart, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen little Polly Pockets. They're these teeny tiny little figures and little sets. And it was $7.50. And so we said to the kids, we'll give you about $10. We'll look for a toy that you would enjoy having. And Hannah lit on those, and they had a whole slew of them. And she said, I could earn one. And I said, well, sweetheart, that would be 75 marbles. And she said, I can do it. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to risk believing her. So I bought it. She couldn't play with it. we gave her one, for the treat of the trip, but I bought a second one and I put it up on the windowsill. We get back on Monday and she begins, and she's in kindergarten math and, just typically did her one required page. Okay, she is doing page after page after page after page. And I said to Gabriel at one point, honey, you need to sit down and do your work. He said, I've waited all year for this. I can't, and he wanted to explain the next page to her. She earned the Polly Pocket before the end of the day. And she said, will you buy another one? I said, you better believe it. She earned the second one the next day. Wasn't all math. A lot of it was math, but then it was phonics. It was other. I cannot tell you, 1 year, she earned an American Girl doll, which took all year. It was 820 marbles. My Joe was really off the wall with all this because he just kept accumulating marbles, and at the end of the year, he turned in over 2,000 marbles and bought himself and Jeremiah a bike. I really could give you more explanation about it, but I'm telling you, it is worth its weight in gold. And it just took all the pressure off of me. And then when we would hit those times where they didn't understand, like the multiplication, we could walk away from the book and I already knew we were ahead, or we would catch up because of the extra credit. So that leads me into the next one. Will you avoid the fear of failure for a child? Because they're always succeeding because the goal is understanding. They're not separated into groups. It doesn't matter what you call the groups. You can call the reading groups the bluebirds, the yellowbirds, and the redbirds, and everyone knows which one is the dumb group. It doesn't matter what you call them. But there's no need to do that. You give them immediate feedback. You catch their misunderstanding. They're reading aloud to you, and you can see what's tripping them up. You praise good work. A lot of times children do good work, and I do not fault teachers, but they can be very slow in getting all the grading done and back to the kids. So they've already moved on to another lesson before a child realizes he or she didn't understand something. And that's really tough in some of the foreign languages and in math, because if you're not fully understanding something, like fractions, and you just keep plowing on, that's going to be reflected in their work. And then children who might actually enjoy math will never get to that point of joy because they're going to begin to think, when it comes to math, I'm just dumb, I'm stupid, I can't get it. Number 5, the children are not the board of education. You avoid the fear of boredom. When you have a bright child, you can go at that child's pace, or it might just be in only one area. Time is well spent. You don't do busy work. Where does busy work come from? Maybe a little from repetition, which can be a good pedagogical device, but most busy work, most seat work is a teacher is managing 20 or 30 children, and so she needs to have everyone doing something. And if they get through quickly, she doesn't want to be individually giving multiple sheets to that particular child, so then they just sit there wasting time. Delight-directed learning takes into account the child's unique interests. I'll give you 2 quick examples. And I have really no idea how time is going to go on this because I'm still on page 1. Okay. Anyway, I like to illustrate these things though. Okay, so I was talking with Michael, and he was really into weapons. He was about 7 years old at the time. He was really into weapons. And I said, you know what's different as we read about different things? Helmets. Helmets have really changed a lot. Like as a typical girl, I didn't notice helmets were anything different than just like a silver cap. But there's spikes on some, there are horns on some. And so we researched it. This was all in the afternoon, extra time, but he was so interested in it that we sketched a whole bunch of different ones, and then we used paper mache on balloons, and we designed different kinds, and we spray painted them silver. It was so much fun. And it was driven because he was into weapons and really wanted to learn more. My younger son was only 5, but he was really into cats. And so I would read a lot of cat facts to him. And we found pictures, and he would copy pictures, and we bought some puzzles of kittens, that 500-piece puzzles that he would put together. When you can pick up on particular interests, you can incorporate that in somehow and just see that delight in learning, because it's contagious. Some of my families in our area are really into music, and they have gifted musicians. Homeschooling lets them have 3-4 hours to practice the piano or the violin and go so much farther earlier. Again, in something that interests them. This is not the parents saying you have to do this. This is their being able to do this. Special athletic skills. There are some people who are able to take advantage of travel teams, which take much longer periods of time because, again, they're not coming home with mounds of homework. Someone asked me, how do you handle homework? Well, it's kind of all homework. And when we're done, we're done. I believe there is a value to children's play, to unstructured time. Why is it not possible to be in school 8 hours that you can't finish your work and you have to come home and do 1, 2, or 3 hours of homework? Why is that a good management of your child's time? You know, especially boys who've sat all day and they come home and they want to blow off some steam, and you've got to manage how do they get through all their homework and get to practice or whatever else is going on in life. Okay, enough on that. Okay, the 5th, and I guess this is along with discipline. One of the reasons to homeschool is that the schedule helps clarify expectations. Now, that's true in school and out of school. On the one hand, we're not reproducing a normal schoolroom, typical schoolroom in our home. The goal is not simply to change location, it's to change a lot of things. But there are strengths to scheduling that are really worth considering. A lot of ordinary life happens in ordinary days. You know, when you fall in love, it's powerful and wonderful and magical, and you know, in the first few days you wake up and you go, I can't believe I'm married to you. But I have to tell you, it isn't what I think of saying to Scott every morning still. I am really, really happy I'm married to him and very grateful, more than I was when we first married. But when I roll over in the morning, it's not the first thing that comes to mind. There's a lot of ordinary life in marriage. And it's okay that there is routine without it being horribly boring. It's okay that there's routine in homeschooling. If it's possible to have a separate room, I found it helpful. It helped define what we do. Now, some people teach at the kitchen counter, and their kids have baskets or bins that their books are in, and that's how they define the space. And you may not have a whole separate room in your house. But for me, it was wonderful to be able to put a globe up on the shelf and maps on the walls and have bookshelves that had some higher shelves toddlers couldn't reach and destroy to display the hard work that the kids had done, and have desks. I will tell you that if you have toddlers and you have desks for your school children, I would definitely get a desk for your toddler, because you will include your toddler one way or another. It will be either as a discipline issue constantly where you're trying to push the child away, or much better if there's a way to draw the child in. So even toddlers on the first day of school would get new crayons, would get new paper, would have assignments where I would pull, blank paper. Oh, mommy needs you need to make a drawing, or something. Draw them up on your lap, even when you're explaining algebra. They want to be close, and if they feel like they're part of it, they're not fighting you. They're not fighting you. Okay. Couple of other things. You could reward their work ethic. About 6th grade level, which I'm sorry, at the end of your first set of grades. So I would give the children, I would always have a list of the subjects they had to do and what they had to do in each one. But in 6th grade, they had the new privilege of choosing the order. Up to that point, I was the one who said, we're doing this and this, because I was going back between tutor intensive and independent work and trying to go throughout the house and have physical activity. There was a lot that went into our schedule. But by 6th grade, I gave them that added freedom. And they were really faithful with it. And now, if any child had, and they had the warning of this, if they had ever just sort of sloughed off, and if they hated math, you know, not do math till the end of the day, and oops, I couldn't get to math, then we would have rethought it, but they never misused it. They really valued that privilege. And they would just come to me and say, okay, you can check this off my list, you can check this off my list. Mom, it's time for this, you know, and I would say, okay, as soon as I'm done, I will be right over with you. And it was just fun to recognize their growing independence, to work on that independent learning, but at the same time, working together, sharing it. I think older children can use desks in their rooms, but one of the things that I think is so important is to realize that the teen years are very social sharing experiences. They don't want to read great literature and not talk to you about it. So if they go off to their room to read their book, have them come back and share what they're reading, what they're studying, what they're learning, and still let that be a shared experience between the two of you. Okay, number 6, we get to select the curriculum we think that is best for our child, not a committee. And many teachers never get to pick the curriculum they most wish they could use, at least in the States. They don't have that freedom. They might really like a particular publisher, but if the school doesn't buy that curriculum, they're stuck with whatever they're handed. We get to choose. I don't know all the choices that you have, but I would say because of the internet, you can pick anything that you want. Public schools publish materials, private schools publish, there are people publishing privately, and teacher guides are available. There are online courses. You can do dual credit in the States. Now, I have no idea if this applies here, but you can take a high school credit class at a local college and get both college credit in advance and complete a high school requirement at the same time. And if you check with your homeschool group, if you check with the other people who homeschool, ask them what they use. Ask them what they really enjoyed and maybe borrow. See if you could borrow a book over a weekend. So you could check it out yourself without having to first buy it. And just see if it appeals to you. I use a secular math book up through, well, actually it's all secular, but up through 6th grade I used Addison Wesley Math. And I just thought their layout was fantastic. They didn't have too many problems. It was colorful, it had kid appeal, and if we were doing a chapter on subtraction after doing math, they had little skill keeper blocks, so every once in a while you would do a few addition problems on a day you were focused on subtraction, so you didn't just leave a new skill that you got. 7th grade we switched to Saxon Math, which I love, and that's very intensively continuing to review other skills that you've learned in other chapters, and I love it. Now, I worked out a deal with my kids. You do all the math problems, and you don't miss 3. You could miss less than 3, and still we would work this out. Then the next day, you only had to do half the problems. You could do every other one. And as long as they kept that up, they could do every other problem for the rest of the book as far as I was concerned. Why? Because the goal was mastery. And if they're showing me mastery, we don't need to keep beating a dead horse. We don't need to keep going over and over the same thing. And so you might want to consider doing that. You can tailor fit it to you. There are lots of phonics programs out there, but you might really like one that's phoneme based. And I preferred one that I used for all my kids, and that was just learning 4 consonants, 1 vowel, doing words, and then doing the next 4 consonants, the next vowel. The one thing I would say is I think the look-say method is really, really lousy, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. And most kids need remedial work with phonics. So I would just really encourage you to go a phonetic way. You can hire tutors. One of the things that we did was, I'm not keen on science, I think only because I never had a good science teacher. I bet I would love it if I actually had had an enthusiastic teacher. But we tapped Franciscan University students who were studying science. They picked up a little money, we put a science class together at our house, they would come to my home, I would buy all the experiment stuff, and it was just a fun, shared experience in science. Spanish, I don't know Spanish, so we hired college kids, and a young man came to teach our kids, and the boys really connected with him, really enjoyed him, and so he taught them for 2 years. At the end of the time, he said, I'm graduating, but and he asked the boys specifically, he said, please pray for me because I'm discerning the priesthood. And so they prayed for him, and then he came back at the end of the summer and he said, I'm going to the seminary, pray for me. So they prayed for him all through seminary, 6 years. When he got out, he was assigned to our parish, and he became their spiritual director. And now those are the 2 boys studying for the priesthood. And so God used something like Spanish to open a door to a special relationship that is still bearing beautiful fruit.